Coming up on Photography Online, we do a test to see how important resolution really is. We shoot a bagpiper with a camera, of course. And we go out to take photos using only our eyes to judge the exposure. Welcome to the April episode of Photography Online, which promises to be our best show this month. Whatever kind of photography you're into, whatever level you're at, and whether you shoot digital or film, there's something for everyone here. So settle in, get comfy, and enjoy the next 45 minutes or so of photography-themed fun, education, and entertainment. To kick it all off, we have our current photo challenge to catch up on. Now, if you haven't seen our previous shows this year, I laid down a challenge to the Photography Online team where I gave them a list of 24 iconic British subjects to photograph in only 12 photos, each one taken exactly on each hour of the watch face. Now, so far, I think it's safe to say they're failing rather miserably, so I've already got my champagne on ice, ready to celebrate my victory, but there is still a long way to go. A big thank you to Accurist Watches who are making this challenge possible, as well as helping out with the most important task of timekeeping. Okay, let's see what the team get up to this time.
Previously on the Great British Icons Photo Challenge.
I want you to try to fit this list of 24 British iconic subjects into the 12 positions on the watch face, taking each shot exactly on the stroke of each hour.
So we need a Highland cow with a red phone box.
It can test how, it's fresh. They must be nearby.
Anything wrong with that cow?
Yes, it's not next to a phone box.
Yeah, so that's a problem.
There you go. Oh my good God!
Go all the way to the right-hand side if you can.
We've got literally a few seconds. That is quite unbelievable.
That was as close as you could get.
There was no denying that we were well behind schedule, with 3 of the available watch positions now filled, but each containing only one icon. We needed to start upping our game, and as we arrived in Edinburgh, we were optimistic that things were about to improve.
Edinburgh Castle was our main focal point, so Harry and I set about finding somewhere where we could potentially add a bagpiper. Nick claimed to know someone who would fit the bill perfectly, so he went off to see if he could track him down. In the meantime, it was simply a case of exploring all the options. The Vennel is a well-known location to us, so we thought we would start there.
So we've got one icon there, we've got Edinburgh Castle,
Only the one though.
but we need to tick off 2 more, don't we? So
2, preferably more if we can.
Well, yeah, it's just cramming them in, but Nick's gone off to sort something, has he?
Well, he's gone off to get the piper, but we did go off to get a cow once and that didn't go overly well. But anyway, I think we've got more faith in Nick.
I don't think he's got to get a piper into a trailer at least.
No, and it's easier to get the piper here than a castle to a piper. Anyway, we've been through all of this and we failed last time, but I do have faith in Nick. But we do have a bit of an issue in this location. It can be quite busy here.
Yeah, it's all right at the moment, but can you imagine?
Yeah, it is all right now. But if we bring
arrives?
a piper up here, it's going to be like flies around a massive lump of shit, isn't it, really? Let's be honest about it. Anyway, and the other issue is this tree, because I know you've shot here before, I've shot here before, and we shoot here in the winter. And what didn't occur to me is that trees have leaves at this time of year, and it obscures half the castle.
It's amazing the difference that makes, huh?
Yeah, a big difference. So I think we just need to get higher up above it, slightly different angle, and maybe a slightly quieter, less honeypot location. And
well, let's just try around there and see what that looks like.
Yeah, and then we can experiment with lenses and practice on each other.
Providing Nick could source a bagpiper, we already had the castle in front of us, and we were hoping the bagpiper would be wearing tartan, as a piper without tartan is about as useful as a tripod without a third leg.
Getting higher up meant we would have fewer passers-by to contend with, and the view of the castle also became cleaner, so we committed to this location.
The next time slot we could take this shot at was 6 o'clock, but we still had plenty of time before then, which was just as well, as we were missing a key part of our scene. So James stood in as an imitation piper while we worked out the technicalities of the shot. Yes, you step in about there, James, and just mock up our bagpiper. You blow lots of hot air, so...
I've had a lifetime of experience doing that.
But we can keep the wall nicely behind it, but the light is bouncing quite nicely into here, so... And from here, it's much easier to shoot at a variety of focal lengths.
So the key is to get the castle as
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a shot of different icons. If we shoot it too wide, like we would have to down there, it's just a shot of a bagpiper, but we need, you know, bagpiper and castle.
So we'll run through, say 3 focal lengths, 24, 50. We suspect 100 is going to be too much.
Let's just have a look.
But we can have a go, can't we?
What, about 2 meters at 24 millimeters?
Yeah.
Should work, so yeah, that's about right there. One of the most useful compositional tools in any photographer's bag is perspective. Adjusting my distance from the foreground, in this case James, allows me to control how much dominance the background has. Here, at only a couple of meters from my foreground, the castle is too small and gets a little lost. Then 50 millimeters, let's go back about 4 meters. So the reason to go back the same distance is the piper is going to stay the same size, but I can magnify the castle. So I've doubled my distance and doubled my focal length, and there we can see he's stayed the same size, but the castle's much more prominent. We'll try 100 mil, but that's going to, I think that's going to get, yeah, very, I'm going to have to chop off legs here, and while that's tempting, it's not going to work very well. That's 24 mil.
Yeah, at 2 meters.
But you know, look how tiny the castle is. It's just.
Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, you can hardly tell it's a castle, let alone a prominent icon.
Yeah, it's not prominent, is it? We're not going to pass the bar with that.
As soon as you get to that 50 millimeters.
And that was at 4 meters, so I'm the same. Castle's considerably bigger.
But I mean, you can see much more of the castle at 100 millimeters.
I look quite good in that, to be honest.
Well, you can see more of you.
So that's at 100 millimeters at 8 meters.
But it's just, you know, legs cropped off, very tight, very claustrophobic. So that middle ground, 50 mil, should work nicely.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'd managed to track down my friend Roddy propping up the bar in his favourite pub. He was due to be playing in a show later this evening, so luckily for us, he was already dressed in his regalia and agreed to give us half an hour of his time. Although I may have mentioned that James would buy him a bottle of whiskey. No need to mention that just now.
Hey.
Hi, how you doing?
Very good. Lovely to meet you.
Nice to meet you
This
too.
is Harry.
Actual bagpiper, not this one.
On time.
Now, it was simply a case of explaining to Roddy what we needed from him at the crucial moment.
So what we're going to do is we've got to wait just a couple of minutes. We've got issues with sun passing over, but basically we've got to take this picture at exactly 6 o'clock. So I reckon with about 30 seconds to go, we'll fire up the pipes and then we'll give you a nod and then eye line straight up there so you pick up a little bit of sunlight on your face. There is a bit of an issue here, but nothing we can do. Your back wind, there you go. Yeah, give it a little flick, that's the way. Perfect. So I'm just going to check the camera position.
I think that's pretty bang on there. So that's actually like 60 mil, but.
Because we're on time here. Right. Yeah. Is that on 60 mil actually? 50 mil.
55.
55, yeah, that's all good.
With the final few seconds before our timekeeping call arrived, it was just a case of crossing the T's and dotting the I's.
Okay, Roddy, we have got 45 seconds to go, so let's get that going. The phone's going to ring any second now. All right, Harry, you ready?
Yeah.
Just waiting for the phone. Here we go. Oh my word. Yeah, fire her up. Oh, here we go. It's ringing. It's ringing. Yep, it's ringing.
This is your timekeeping call from Accurist. On the third stroke, the time according to Accurist will be precisely 6 o'clock.
Now. So you wouldn't believe that was 50 mil, would you?
It doesn't.
So it just goes to show, because that looks like a wider angle shot.
It's really wide angle. I mean, we'll just double check, but it's 58 millimeters.
58 millimeters, it just goes to show. Never stop learning.
The most important measure of the photo, however, was what the main man thought.
There we are. What do you think? Make it up.
Looks fabulous. I think you've captured the scene perfectly.
Slide in that 20 now.
Look at that. Pin sharp, Harry. Good job.
Are you saying I took a sharp picture for once?
Well, yeah, funnily enough, with a bit of help of autofocus, but nonetheless, it is there.
But the focal length was the right choice. What,
Yeah,
50-ish millimeters? Castle's nice and big.
It is.
Loads of detail on the piper.
Okay guys, you've got a nice shot there. So I delivered a Piper for you.
You did.
In tartan.
You did.
With a castle behind.
It's three icons.
But look up here. Union Jack.
I hadn't even seen that.
4 icons in the one photo.
Yeah, it's clear as daylight. Look at that.
So the Union Jack is an extra icon. So we've got 4. That still puts us behind after our...
Only by one. Only by one.
So we should be able to catch
we'll
up
get a good
now.
night's sleep.
Yeah.
And then off tomorrow.
Well, what are we going to do next? I think Nick gets to choose because he did
did such
deliver.
a good job.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. To be fair, come on, what's in there then?
Oh, well, I like my landscape photography. I mean, look what's at the top. The countryside.
Just the countryside, nice and broad.
Well, how about we head south off the
Well, we
border?
surely can find something just driving around, can't we? So
Maybe some English countryside.
Let's get going.
Yeah.
Next time on the Great British Icons Photo Challenge.
So this is it.
yeah, this is more like it, isn't it?
Welcome to the North Pennines. Still got the trees in the shot. You don't want to be looking down the path because you don't want to drag the eye out of frame. I think there's a pub a couple of miles over that way.
That's 1 o'clock gone, Chris. So,
Shame. We're here at the right time. We've got the right composition.
yeah.
We just need Harry.
Well, to be fair, I have to hand it to them. 4 icons in one shot is pretty good, even if one was a complete fluke. Sadly, I didn't write anything about that into the rules, so I must remember to remove luck from the terms of the next challenge. Thank you once again to Accurist Watches for keeping time on the challenge. In return for them supporting us, please do support them by taking a look at their wide range of watches for both men and women, which make the perfect gift for someone who appreciates style. If you like the look of Edinburgh, then make sure to keep an eye out for next month's show when we have a 20-minute photo guide to the city. We meet up with a resident pro photographer who shares his best places in the city to go with a camera. Okay, well, before we press play on our next feature, I wanted to quickly give you a couple of YouTube settings tips as we get a lot of comments from people who seem to be struggling with some of the technicalities. The first thing we recommend is to set the video quality to 1080 Premium HD, otherwise you may be watching in reduced quality, which is what YouTube defaults to. Second, unless you need the closed captions to help you understand what we're saying, which I suppose might be the case if English isn't your first language, then do turn these off as they overlap many of our own graphics. The subtitles are auto-generated and can be very inaccurate, so only use them if you have to. And finally, do take advantage of the link section in the video description. It is amazing how many people don't know where to find this. As long as you're watching on a handheld device or a computer, then you just need to press the More button in the video description, which then opens up a list and gives you easy access to everything that we refer to in each show. Hopefully that will help you to enhance your enjoyment of our content. Okay, well, last month Nick looked at getting C-type prints from a pro lab. This month he's staying on a similar theme by looking at just how important resolution is.
Come on, admit it. You've spent your hard-earned money on a camera which outputs far more resolution than you're ever likely to use. In the world of cameras and photography today, the one thing you hear people bragging about more than anything else is megapixels and resolution.
It's not our fault though. You see, we've been tricked by the camera brands into thinking that resolution is important. While that may be true for some, and I'll come to that in a moment, for the vast majority, 50, 60 or even 100 megapixels will do nothing more than give you bragging rights down at your camera club's bi-monthly meetings. It's a guy thing, I guess. It's as though it's in our DNA that size matters. Put it this way, I never hear female photographers discussing megapixels. And maybe us guys can learn something from this and concentrate on the things that do matter.
There are both advantages and disadvantages to having more megapixels on your sensor, so let's look at what these are. The two obvious advantages I can think of for having mega amounts of megapixels is to be able to print really big and to have the option to crop heavily in post. More on these in a moment.
but surely there must be more advantages than this. So I asked a few experts in their field, well, okay, the Photography Online team, to see if they could think of other benefits for having more megapixels on your sensor.
Well, no, yeah, you've got, no, wait a minute.
Well, doesn't it give you the ability to... Oh no, hang on, that's something else. Oh, hang on, I'm getting confused.
Well, yeah, you've got the, no, pass.
Well, there might be a couple, but they're very niche.
Okay, so we're having a few problems finding the benefits. So what about the disadvantages?
Well, the noise floor is increased.
Well, it certainly costs more.
We get less dynamic range.
You're really going to need bigger cards and a more powerful computer.
So it seems there are more disadvantages to advantages, but let's not get all negative here. I want to focus on the positives, which should allow you to print bigger and crop further.
Let's look at the latter first. Cropping in post is really not what you want to be doing if you can avoid it. If you find that you're regularly cropping your images quite heavily, then you could probably benefit from working on your compositional skills, as cropping with a lens is always better than cropping after the fact. If you've bought a medium format camera and you end up cropping 30% off all sides, then you could have saved a lot of money and bought an APS-C camera or even a Micro Four Thirds camera and got the same results.
You might not have a lens long enough to get those wildlife shots you want, so you end up cropping right in to get the magnification to where it needs to be. But this is not the ideal way to go, as it leads to bad practice. You'd be better off spending your money on a longer lens than on a higher resolution camera. So although the cropping in argument is a valid one, it really isn't an ideal one.
So that leaves us with one advantage, to be able to print really big. But come on, when was the last time you printed an image at all? Let alone a really big one. While some of us do print big, most of us only ever show our photos on social media or our websites, and this is where resolution really doesn't matter. To prove this point, I prepared 4 versions of the same photo. One at 45 megapixels, one at 24 megapixels, one at 12 megapixels, and one at 6 megapixels. I went down to my local bar with 3 different types of devices we view digital photos on: a phone, a tablet, and a computer, to see if the staff could identify the highest and lowest resolution photos.
Tell me if you can see any difference in the clarity or the sharpness of each image.
I got 6 different people to do the same test and the results speak volumes. Only one of them managed to correctly identify the lowest quality images on the iPhone, which out of 6 people choosing from 4 options is lower than the law of averages.
Can't really see any difference.
Okay.
They all look pretty much
Okay, that's fine. So if you move on to the iPad.
When it came to the iPad's larger screen, not one of them managed to correctly identify the highest and lowest resolution files. In fact, it was quite the opposite.
I think one definitely looks not as sharp.
Okay.
I would say number 3 stands out. If I had to pick one, I'd say 3 was the kind of sharpest out of them.
Oh dear, they're not doing very well. But maybe viewing a 5K screen at close distance will help them to see the huge difference in resolution.
I would say number 3 is the sharpest again in that one.
Okay.
I think number 4.
In this, I'd go for either 4 or 1.
Finally, John got the right answer. But hang on a minute, he's taking his glasses off.
I changed my mind altogether. I'll go with 3 as the sharpest.
Okay. So, maybe not surprisingly, this shows that resolution is really not a factor if this is how you showcase your work. But what about if you do make large prints? How important is resolution then?
To answer this question, I've decided to do another test. I've made 5 versions of this photo here, all of which are identical except for one thing: the resolution. These are all C-type prints which we got done at SimLab, who came out top in our Pro Print Lab comparison last month. I'm going to get the same people to view the photos from 2 meters away, and then at the optimal viewing distance to see if they can pick out the highest and lowest resolution versions. To let you in on the game, one is printed at 450 dpi, one at 300, then 240, 150 and finally 72 dpi.
Right, Callum. Oh, just a second. That's better. So I've got 5 prints on the wall. Just when you can stand just by this table. Feel free to move left and right because obviously the light changes, so I'll move out of your way. And tell me if you can tell which one is the sharpest and which one is the least sharp.
From 2 meters distance, there was no consistency to the answers, with a couple of people identifying the 72 dpi image as the sharpest and the 300 dpi version as the least sharp.
What do I win?
Right, if you could help me move the table to the wall, we'll do the same, so you'll be a lot closer this time. And then we'll do the same. So again, just standing here. You're just standing here, so you're a lot closer. Do you feel the same this time?
No.
At the closest comfortable viewing distance, a couple of people did correctly identify the 72 dpi version as being the least sharp, but no one picked the 450 dpi as being the sharpest. But what about someone with a highly trained eye for detail?
Okay, so the prints have been rearranged. Obviously I didn't see which order that Louise did them in. It's now my turn to see if I can tell the difference. So, I would hazard a guess from this distance, the least sharp would be the top right, but the most sharp, I mean if I had to pick one, the top left I think.
From the closest comfortable viewing distance, things did become a little clearer.
And straight away, I'm pretty confident that, as I said from further away, top right is the least sharp. And I mean, even at this close distance, it's hard to tell the most sharp really, without using a loupe or a magnifier. I mean, I kind of want to stick to my guns and say top left. So the conclusion of my test shows that anything over 6 megapixels is irrelevant when viewing online. For prints, if you have either perfect or experienced vision, then you can identify a 72 dpi print from minimum viewing distance. But as for the others, no one could tell them apart, including myself, which I found surprising.
From anything further than a couple of meters away, 3 of our participants identified the 72 dpi as the sharpest, and the same said either the 450 or 300 dpi versions were the least sharp. From this, we can calculate that if you want to make a photo 40 inches along the longest edge, then you only need to make a print at 150 dpi. This means you only need a 24 megapixel camera to get a print of this size. If, like me, you have a 45 megapixel camera, then you can print at 55 inches or 1.4 meters.
The maximum size many photographers print at is A3+, which is similar to this. If this is you, then you only need, wait for it, a 6 megapixel camera. Having more than that is just a waste. As we've already discovered, not only is it going to cost you more money and force you to buy bigger memory cards and a more powerful computer, not to mention extra storage space. You're going to get more noise, camera shape will become more of an issue, and your readout speed will be slower, meaning less frames per second in burst mode.
So there we have it. We now have a conclusive answer to the question, how many megapixels do we really need?
So if you're jealous of Derek down the camera club just because he has a 100 megapixel camera, then don't be. Unless of course you want to make a print 2 by 3 meters, in which case you better get saving. Not so much for the camera, but for the house you're going to need that's big enough to hang that size of a print on the wall.
Thanks, Nick. If, like me, you haven't upgraded your camera for a few years and are subconsciously thinking that you're falling behind the times, then this feature will hopefully help to settle any insecurities you have with your gear, since clearly it's not that important to have the latest 50 or 100 megapixel camera. Okay, so in addition to this monthly show, we also produce our monthly PO live show to thank all our supporters, a wonderful group of people affectionately known as our POOs. They help to fund the show you're watching now, so if you get something out of what we do, please consider giving back by joining them. It's about the same as buying Marcus a Morello Cherry Refresher each month, which was his drink of choice last time we ate out, and we put all the money back into the making of the show. Last month, supporter money paid for the prints that we got done at the Pro Labs, and we gave these away on our live show. This month we'll be doing the same, giving back to our supporters what they've helped to pay for. So if you're not already one of the Poos but would like to join in and get double the content each month, then simply press the join button, which is usually down here somewhere, or go to the relevant link below. If you're already one of our Poos, then do hang around until the end of the show, where we'll be giving every single one of you a shout out. Right, so last month we had an amazing reaction to our eyeballing exposure feature, where Marcus explained the foundations of the art of being able to judge exposure simply by looking at a scene with your eyes. This month he's going to show us how to apply this to the camera settings we're all familiar with.
In part 1 of eyeballing exposure, which was in last month's show, I explained all about the EV scale. If you haven't already seen that, then stop watching this now and go back to watch that first. Otherwise, this is probably not going to make much sense.
As I said last time, this month I'm going to be heading out with this camera, which has no light meter, and no, I'm not going to be taking a separate handheld light meter because I have two right here. So that can go back on the shelf. And I'm going to expose this roll of film, which is Ilford FP4, it gives me 10 exposures in this camera. And I want to try and work in a variety of different lighting scenarios. So I may have to record this over a number of days, but I'm going to talk you through the process step by step as I go.
As I go around, I'll explain how I'm converting the EV values to the settings I'm selecting on the camera. If I was shooting digitally, then this would be exposure time, aperture, and ISO. But as I'm shooting film, the ISO is already fixed to the film I have chosen, which in this case is ISO 125.
Now, before we go any further, a question that I'm often asked is why I always refer to exposure time rather than the more commonly used term shutter speed. And it's simply because the shutter only has one speed. It doesn't matter what camera you use or whether you're shooting at 1 second or 1/1000th of a second. The shutter will always move at the same speed. It just stays open for longer if you're shooting at 1 second than it does if you're shooting at 1/1000th of a second. Some modern cameras don't even have a shutter, and yet people still refer to shutter speed, so this is clearly not correct. Now, if I'm explaining the concept of the exposure triangle to somebody who's new to photography, if I use the term shutter speed, they might imagine that there's a shutter in the camera that moves at different speeds, and this isn't going to get them off to the best of starts. So while I have no problem with other people using the term shutter speed, after all, we all know what they mean, I don't use it myself because technically it's incorrect. Now, while we're on the subject of the exposure triangle and terminology, it's ISO and not ISO. You don't refer to aperture as APERTURE, so there's no need to spell out ISO either. It's not an acronym, so if you want to be correct, then it's ISO. In fact, if you want to be super correct, it's actually ISO, but by saying that you sound like a bit of a plonker, albeit a correct plonker.
I've made this chart, which, if you're one of our army of Poos, you can download for free simply by going to the link which is available to all our supporters. This basically gives you all the information you're likely to need to allow you to become proficient in eyeballing exposure. It will give you all the clues to allow you to start estimating the light levels of almost any scene, and then tell you what settings you need to enter into your camera to get the perfect exposure.
For example, for this scene here, which is about 20 minutes before sunset on a pretty overcast day, according to this chart, it's likely to be EV8. So if we turn the page over, it gives us all the variable exposure times and apertures for this scene at EV8, depending on how much depth of field we want and whether we want to blur or freeze any movement.
These are decisions which are unique to each individual situation and subject, so they can only be decided by you. This is not what we are discussing today. We're simply looking at how to judge exposure by using only your eyes.
Ultimately, this is just intended to get you to the point where you don't need it anymore, because you can instinctively look at any naturally lit scene and know the exposure just by using your eyes. To do this, all you need to remember is the exposure settings for EV14, which is direct sunlight. As I mentioned last month in part 1, this is 1/250th of a second, f11, ISO 100. If you can remember this and learn the skills to identify the different EV values, then you can estimate the exposure for almost any naturally lit scene. It's actually amazing how much leeway you have, because you can be a whole stop out and still have a perfectly acceptable exposure. So in this way, you can be 100% wrong and still be right. It's basically the opposite of marriage, where you can be 100% right and still be told you're wrong.
But let's not dwell on that. How about we go around and have some fun by seeing what we can find to take some photos of? I'll try to find as many different lighting scenarios as I can, and I'll talk you through the process of how I'm determining the exposure for each one.
These conditions that I'm in now, fairly common in the UK. It's the middle of the day, we've got overcast skies. I can't see any evidence of where the sun might be. I know it's up there somewhere, but I can't see that. I certainly don't have a shadow. So I'm going to call this EV10. And I'm going to take a picture of this building here with this other building in the foreground. Because they're at different distances, I'm going to probably have to shoot that at f8. So we're at EV10, which is 4 stops darker than our base scenario at EV14. My camera, as always, is set to f11 and 1/250th of a second. So I know that I'm going to need f8 for that. So open up 1 stop to f8. So that leaves 3 stops on the exposure time that I need to open up. So I'm going to go from 250 to 125, that's 1 stop. Go to 60, that's 2 stops. Go to a 30th, that's 3 stops. So that's giving me the right exposure for this scene in this light. But I'm not going to be able to hand hold this at a 30th of a second. So I'm going to put it on a tripod and then take the shot. Now, there's some woods over there with a nice waterfall in them. This light's perfect for that, so why don't we head over there and try and get another shot. In the time it's taken me to get from the last location to here, the ambient light levels have actually lifted a little bit. I can see some blue sky up there, and what little rain there was has eased off. So outside of this woodland, I would say it's probably EV11 right now. But because we're in this deep ravine and we've got this tree canopy over the top of us, albeit that there's no leaves on the trees, I think that that's reducing the scene by about a stop of light. So I'm going to keep this at EV10. Now, my settings for this scene are going to be completely different because the camera's going here. I need a small aperture to give me the sufficient depth of field I need to get the foreground and the background sharp. But crucially, I also need a slow or a long exposure time to capture the movement in the water. So let's go through this again. So we'll reset everything so we're at our base exposure, which is f11 at 1/250th of a second. Now that's EV14, remember, that's all you need to remember here. So we need to increase that by 4 stops because we've decided that this is EV10. However, I'm going to go the other way to start with. So from f11, I'm actually going to go to f22, which is 2 stops, closing the lens down. So we're now 6 stops underexposed for this scene. So all we need to do is add 6 stops to the exposure time. Let's do it together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That gives us a 1/4 of a second. Now that's the perfect exposure time to capture the movement in the water, and f22 is giving me the perfect depth of field to ensure that my scene is reasonably sharp from front to back. The two together are going to give me the perfect exposure for EV10, which is what we've determined this scene to be. It's as simple as that. So this is another familiar lighting scenario which photographers find themselves in very often. Basically, the sun has just set. We don't have any colour in the clouds, but I don't care because I'm shooting black and white anyway. But crucially, the light levels are always pretty constant at sunset if it's relatively clear. Now, we've got quite a significant amount of cloud over to the west, and that's going to be reducing a lot of that light because usually there'll be a glow on the horizon. which would be flooding in to help lift the luminance levels. That's not happening because that cloud's blocking it out. So I'm going to call this EV6. So all we need to do is EV6 is 8 stops less than 14. So I'm going to shoot this probably at f4 because I want a reasonably shallow depth of field. I want the phone box to be sharp, the background to be a little bit soft. So I'm going to change from f11 to f4, count how many stops that is. So that's 1, 2, 3. So it's 3 stops done. I'm left with 5 more to go. The only way I can do that on this camera, because my ISO is fixed to the film, is to do it on the exposure time. So let's do that. So go from 250th to 125, that's 1, to 60 is 2, to 30 is 3, to 15 is 4, and then to 8 is 5. So we're at 1/8 of a second at f4. Let's go and take the shot quickly because the light levels are falling all the time. So this one's a fairly straightforward one, really. We're in the middle hours of the day, the sun's reasonably high in the sky. However, it's not direct sunlight, it's being diffused by some high altitude cloud. So I can clearly see where the sun is. I've got an observable shadow on the floor. Now it's only subtle, but I can see it. That's important because that would normally indicate between EV12 and 13. So crucially here, my subject is white. So it's a very bright subject. So I'm going to shoot this at EV13 just because I don't want to overexpose the brickwork there. So I've got my base exposure, which is EV14 already in the camera, f11, 1/250th of a second. So all I need to do is overexpose that by 1 stop to get to EV13. I'm going to shoot this from quite low down here just to add a bit of drama. Okay, this one is a pretty easy one, and there's a reason for that. So we're about an hour before sunset, maybe 45 minutes before sunset, but it's mostly thick cloud up there, which is obviously reducing the light levels. But the reason why I said it's an easy one is because I'm calling this at EV9. And EV9 is when you would turn your headlights on if you were driving a car, or if you have your headlights set to auto, so they come on when it gets dark enough, they'll come on at EV9. So if I'm driving along the road in this luminance, I would tend to turn my headlights on and I would expect to see other cars with their headlights on. So I'm going with EV9. Now I'm going to shoot this lone tree. You can see that the branches are moving a little bit, plus I don't have a tripod, so I want to keep the exposure time as short as possible. So when I go from EV14, which is what my camera's set to at the moment, to EV9, that's 5 stops. So I'm going to try and do it with the aperture. So I'm going to go f11, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I run out of aperture because I'm at f2.8. So I can't do my 5th one, so I'm going to have to do my 5th one on the exposure time. So f2.8 at 125th of a second. Boom. So this is the darkest light that we're likely to be working in, and when the ambient light nicely balances with the artificial light, it's generally EV3 to 4. So these lighting conditions don't last for long because in the morning, obviously, it's getting brighter, the ambient's getting stronger all the time, and in the evening, as we are here, the ambient's getting darker all the time. So I'm going to take this shot before I lose my chance. Okay, so we're not going to bother counting this time, but basically from EV14 to EV4 is 10 stops. So I'm going to go 1 stop on the aperture and 9 on the exposure time, and that's going to take me to 1 second at f8. Okay, so this one is another familiar lighting scenario. Middle of the day, bright but overcast. Now, I've got a very, very subtle shadow, but it's so subtle that there's no point in me even showing it to you because you can only kind of see it if you're really looking for it. I don't think the camera will pick it up. But I think that this is exactly halfway between EV11 and EV12. So judging EV values is not about just selecting the nearest value, although that's perfectly good enough. But in this scenario, I'm going to do this at EV11.5. So I'm going to take a photo of this, what's an old post office, and I quite like the for sale sign. So once again, I've got f11 at 1/250th. So because I've got various things at different distances, I don't really want to go wider than f8. So I'm going to open up a stop on the aperture to f8, and then I'll go 1.5 stops on the exposure time. So from 250, I'll go to a 90th of a second. Take this one, see how it comes out. This is a lighting scenario that many landscape photographers will be familiar with. We're in the middle of the golden hour. The sun is just a couple of degrees above the horizon, but the air is really clear. So this is almost always certainly EV11. So I'm going to shoot this at f5.6. So I've opened up 2 stops from f11. So I need to do one more stop on the exposure time. So I'm going to go to 125th of a second. Let's take the shot, see how it turns out.
With 2 exposures left on the roll, it was all going so well. That was until I got to my final location where I planned to finish the film.
And if you want to expose for the highlights and put your shadow, no. You absolute moron, I've just dry fired that.
So, we'll have to make do with 9 exposures rather than 10.
So you're probably thinking that I've left the easiest until last, and in some respects you're right. So here we are, bright middle of the day sunshine, and it's EV14 all day long. So I've got f11, 1/250th of a second selected on my camera as always. I don't have to make any adjustments because they're the settings for EV14. So all I have to do is turn around and take the shot. Now, I'm going to do that, but I want to let you know about a couple of bear traps that you might fall into when shooting in such conditions. But let me take this shot first. So if you remember last month in part 1, I mentioned that all these EV values are really only accurate if your subject is being side-lit. And that's why I can be confident that this is EV14, because that's my subject there, my light source is there, the 2 are at 90 degrees, it's being side-lit. However, when you're out shooting in conditions like these, the light can change depending on your angle to the sun. So if you're out on an overcast day, it doesn't matter which angle you're shooting from, the light is constant. But in these conditions, if I was shooting the house from behind, looking into the sun, then I have 2 choices to make. Do I expose for the shadows and therefore blow out the highlights, or do I expose for the highlights and put my subject into silhouette and therefore lose the shadows? And these are choices that only you can make. There's no right and wrong, but don't just assume that every angle that you look at on a bright sunny day is EV14. It only applies when your subject is being side-lit.
So, with the film now finished, it was time to develop it and see how I got on. Many people think film processing is difficult, but it really couldn't be easier to do yourself at home.
Okay, moment of truth. Oh, we have images.
The anticipation of waiting to see how your photos turn out is an experience which is sadly missing when shooting digitally.
They all look pretty good to me. Even the dry fire one is correctly exposed.
So here they all are on the light box, a whole roll of film exposed in various lighting scenarios, all calculated simply by eyeballing the exposure of each one. We'll ignore the dry fire shot in the lower right, but let's take a look at each of the other ones to see if I could have improved the exposure. All of these have been scanned without any adjustments other than some cleaning of dust marks. The black and white points were at their extremes and the midpoint was set to 0. So what you're about to see is essentially the equivalent of an unedited RAW file. I exposed this one at EV10, and as you can see, I've achieved a good range of tones from a deep shadow to a bright white. You might say that the sky is overexposed, but if you remember how the scene was, there was no detail in the sky to capture. This one was also exposed at EV10, even though it's a completely different lighting scenario. The exposure here is perfect, with a pure white and a solid black, yet retaining detail at both ends of the range. The next one I exposed at EV6, as it was around sunset on a mostly cloudy day. Once again, there's a good tonal range from black to white with detail in the sky. This one was exposed at EV13 as the sun was out, but it was very weak due to being diffused by high altitude cloud. If you remember, I estimated the luminance level to be between EV12 and EV13, but shot it at EV13 to ensure detail was recorded in the white stone of the house, which has turned out perfectly. This one was shot at EV9, as it was an overcast day towards the end of daylight hours. Remember that EV9 is where you would typically turn on car headlights. We have a pure black and a pure white, yet still have some subtle detail in the sky, which is all that was really there. Remember, this could easily be enhanced at the print stage if desired. This was the lowest EV value I shot. Remember that when the ambient light balances nicely with the artificial light, it's usually between EV3 and EV4. I shot this at EV4 because the floodlights were very bright and I was concerned about the highlights. This proved to be the right decision as I've just about kept detail in the highlights. There is loss of detail in the shadow areas, but this is simply because the dynamic range of the scene is too high to capture everything in one shot. Had I exposed at EV2, I would have captured full shadow detail, but would have sacrificed the highlights, which I think are more important here. This one is the first one where I can say I could have improved the exposure, as this is about half a stop overexposed. Although I have a pure black in the windows, I haven't captured as much detail in the sky as was present on the day, so shooting this at EV12 would have been better than EV11.5. This one is good, with a pure black and pure white achieved. The sky was clear blue, so there was no detail to capture in it. Had I wanted the sky to come out as a darker tone, then I could have used an orange or a red filter and adjusted the exposure accordingly. Finally, we have the EV14 photo, which is the easiest one to judge. We have a pure black, a pure white, and detail in the sky. So even if we include the dry fire shot, I would say that I got 9 out of the 10 exposures perfect. I missed the remaining one by about half a stop. I know that if I'd used a camera in semi-automatic mode, such as aperture priority, I wouldn't have got such a high hit rate, as the church scene and possibly the waterfall scene here would have been fooled by the meter into overexposing, as these are made up of predominantly darker tones, something the camera is not aware of. So even if you shoot digitally, being able to eyeball exposure is a great skill to have in your toolbox, and it will make you more aware of the qualities of light, which in turn will make you a better photographer.
Next time you're out with your camera, before you turn it on, look at the scene and try and estimate what you think the exposure is going to be. At first, you might find that you're a couple of stops out. That's okay, but with practice, you should be able to get this down to about half a stop, which is perfectly adequate for almost any scene.
If you have questions on that, do feel free to ask them in the comments. We read all of the comments and reply to as many as we can. Naturally, we prioritise comments from our poos, but we do try to get around to the others that we feel warrant a reply. We'll be expanding on the topic as well as everything else we've covered in our PO Live show in a couple of weeks' time, so please do join us for that. As I mentioned, PO Live is only available for our official supporters, so give it a go and see what you're missing. The latest episode of the Photography Online podcast, which is in partnership with Kingjoy Tripods, has also just gone live. In this month's show, we discuss the camera eaten by a shark, the woman who got her hand bitten off when she tried to take a selfie with a shark, not the same one. We do what we believe is the best photography quiz in existence, and we look at new camera and lens releases from Sigma and Panasonic and ask the very important question, does the world really need them? You can listen right now on all the usual podcast platforms, but if you don't listen to podcasts and don't know what these are, simply Google Photography Online Podcast and you will find one straight away. It's great to listen to in the car, on the train, wherever you want an hour of entertaining photography-themed radio to listen to. All right, well, that brings us to the end of another show, but we will, of course, be back next month with the next instalment of the Photo Challenge, plus our epic photo guide to Edinburgh, and we'll be looking at reflectors and how to use them. Until then, take good care. But most of all, take good photos. sure to keep an eye out for next month's show when we've got a 20-minute photo guide to the city. We meet up with We meet up with the president.
It's lightly raining, it's a little bit dull, but it's still bright. That doesn't make sense, does it?
The first one of these is we recommend that you set the video quality to 1080 Premium HD, otherwise you may be
reset our values to EV14, which we know is 250th.
But surely there must be more advantages. Advantages. Don't know, I'm trying to make it a longer word than it is.
Even though it's EV11 outside, we're reducing the scene by about a stop of light, just because, Marcus, you ramble on like a...
Right, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, Kira, how good is your eyesight?
Louise.
Sorry, Louise. This is what happens when you're on camera. Right.
Well, there might be a couple, but they're very niche. Don't laugh. Don't laugh.
And I've got my base exposure locked in at f11 and 1/250th of a second. So to that sake, Marcus.
Okay, well, last month Nick looked at getting C-type prints from a pro lab. This month he's staying on a similar theme by looking just how really from the top.